Hello everyone. Hi to and welcome to my third lesson on Indian polity, that is on the salient features of the constitution. Today we are going to talk about the salient features of our constitution. So let's get started. First one, lengthiest written constitution. Our constitution is considered as the lengthiest written constitution in the world. Okay, so originally in 1949, 395 articles. There were 395 articles divided into 22 parts and 8 schedules. Presently, as of now, there are 465 articles divided into 25 parts and 12 schedules. So our constitution is one of the lengthiest written constitution. What are the reasons for this? First one is the geographical factors, that is the vastness of the country and its diversity. As you know that in India there are so many religions, so many castes, so many traditions, so many culture. So when our constitution was to be made, okay, our founding fathers, they wanted that every person in India, okay, every person in India should have equal right and should live with equal justice. They should get equal justice, they should have equal rights. So where in India there are in India where there's so much diversity, there's so much diversity, all there are so many religions, caste, culture, languages and all those things, everyone should be considered equal in India. So that made our constitution lengthy because so many provisions should be included, right? Even for the weaker sections, extra provisions were there so that they can uplift themselves. Okay, so that they can uplift themselves and they can work even harder, and everyone should be treated equal, right? So that's why the constitution was made lengthy. Okay. Second one, historical factors. The influence of the Government of India Act of 1935, which was bulky. So many provisions were taken as it is from the Government of India Act of 1935, and it was already very bulky, it was already very big. So many provisions were taken as it is from the 1935 Act of India, of Government of India Act. Okay, so because of that it made our constitution very lengthy. Third one, single constitution for both the center and the states except Jammu and Kashmir. So there's a single constitution for both the center and the states. Okay, if you talk about the US, they have separate constitution, one for the state and one for the center. Okay, but in India we believe in unity, we believe in the common brotherhood of all the citizens. We want our India to be united, to remain united all the time. Okay, so that's why there was only one constitution which was made, single constitution was made for both the center and the states. And as there are so many other states and they practice different culture, tradition and all those things, so everything should be taken into consideration, right? So everything should be taken into consideration. That's why that made our constitution very lengthy. Fourth one, majority of the members of the Constituent Assembly were from legal background. What does this mean? This means that our founding fathers, majority of our founding fathers who have made the constitution, they were from legal background. Okay, so they knew what are the loopholes which can arise, what are the mistakes which can arise, and they wanted to minimize it as much as possible. Okay, so all the provisions so that people don't misuse those provisions. Okay, so later on in the future, so that people don't misuse those provisions, they knew that what all mistakes can occur, what all errors can be occurred. So they wanted to minimize all these things, they wanted to minimize all these things as much as possible. So that's why they included various more clauses were included and provisions were included, so that made the constitution lengthy. Ultimately, these things made our constitution lengthy. Okay, so what are the reasons? First is a geographical factor, because of our country is so diverse. Then comes the historical factors. Okay, influence of Government of India Act of 1935. Then single constitution for both the center and the state, except Jammu and Kashmir, and majority of the members were from legal background. Okay, so that is the first point on the salient features of the constitution, that is the lengthiest written constitution. Now let's come to the second point. Drawn from various other sources, the Constitution of India has borrowed most of its provision from the constitutions of various other countries, as well as from the Government of India Act of 1935. Okay, so we have drawn the constitution, we have made a constitution by borrowing from various other, from borrowing the provisions from various other constitutions of the world. So we studied the founding fathers, they studied into the various other constitutions of the world, and they took those provisions which can be suitable for us, okay, for Indians, and everything. So they took those provisions which can be suitable and which they thought will be perfect for us, for the smooth governing of the country, which provisions will be very useful. Okay, please refer to page 3.11, okay, the table 3.4, and there you can see from various other, there you can see the list of the world's constitution, all the other countries constitution. From those constitution, what all provisions were taken and were implemented in the Indian constitution. So please go ahead and read that. Okay, I have not mentioned that here, though it is very easy. You can go ahead and you can read those things. Okay, now third one, blend of rigidity and flexibility. What does this mean? Rigidity means special procedure for amendment. Flexibility mean can be amended in the same manner as the ordinary laws are made. Okay, in the previous chapter I explained you what is amendment. Okay, that is the existing constitution which is there. If the parliament wants, they can modify. Okay, they can modify, they can add, they can delete. Okay, so that becomes amendments, okay, of the constitution. Now we are talking about rigidity and flexibility. What does these things mean? Rigidity means special procedure for amendment. Now what are the procedure? You need a special majority. Okay, that becomes, you need a majority, basically you need a majority. That is how you can amend the constitution. Okay, now rigidity means that the amendment procedure in some provisions, okay, in some provisions in the constitution, the amendment procedure becomes very difficult. Okay, what did I say? I said that in some provisions in our constitution, if you want to modify those provisions which are already existing in the constitution, if you want to modify those provisions at that time, you need a majority, right? At that time you need a majority. So some provisions are very difficult to amend, very difficult to amend. How? Some provisions can be amended by a special majority of the parliament, that is two-third of majority of the members of each house present and voting, and a majority that is more than 50% of the total membership of each house. I have explained this thing earlier. I explained this thing in the first chapter. Okay, so this thing says that you need a special majority, that is two-third majority of the members present and voting. So if two-third members, so how many, if 400 people are there, so more, two-third of 400 will be around 268, right? So more than 268 people should be accepting that bill. accepting that will. But there is one more clause, which is that is more than 50% of the total membership should be supporting, which means even if it's 268, but is what is the total membership of the Lok Sabha? It is it is 545, right? It's 545. Out of 545, more than 273 will be the total, will be the 50% of the total membership, right? So when you in this procedure, it's said that more than 50% of the total membership should be supporting that bill, which means that you need more than 273 people supporting that bill, and the number should be more than two-third of the total house, two-third majority of the total house. So when we talk about these things make it so difficult to amend a provision in the constitution, right? Because you need such a huge majority, right? You need such a huge majority. So these things make it so difficult to amend some procedure. That's why it's called as rigid. Okay, if you want to amend some provision in the constitution, then it becomes very rigid. Okay, it becomes very difficult. Okay, then there are some of the provisions can be amended by a special majority of the parliament and with the ratification by half of the total states. So this thing has made it more difficult. First you need a special majority, two-thirds should be present and voting, okay, and a majority of more than 50% of the total membership of the house. That is itself difficult. Besides that, plus what you need is more than half of the states should also be accepting it, right? So this has made it more difficult, right? So that's why it's said that there's difficulty. It's difficult to amend a procedure for amend a provision in the constitution. However, at the same time, some provisions of the constitution can be amended by a simple majority of the parliament in the manner of ordinary legislative process. So till now we were saying that some provisions are very difficult to amend in the constitution. However, there are some provisions also. Okay, there are some provisions also in the constitution which can be amended, which can be modified by a simple majority. So we are a blend. So the constitution is a blend of rigidity and flexibility. Okay, so the constitution is a blend of rigidity and flexibility. They practice both, which means some provisions are very difficult to amend. In the same manner, some provisions are very easy to amend. Okay, so that is what this point says. Fourth point, federal system with unitary bias usually follows a federal type of government. So basically, India usually follows a federal type of government, which means that there is division of powers between the center and the states. Okay, so the powers has been divided between the center and the states. However, if a situation arises which needs the center to be more powerful, okay, which needs to be which needs the center to be more powerful or all powerful, at that time even that provision has been written in our constitution. Okay, so in that case what happens is that the state will be given minimum or no powers and all the decisions will be taken by the center. Okay, so when we talk about federation, at that time there's division of powers. Okay, but unitary means that only one organization or one institution will make most of the powers, that is the center. Okay, when we talk about unitary, that at that time only one or one group or one organization will make the all the decisions. But when we talk about federal system, it is the division of powers between the center and the states. Now, when we talk about federation, what are the features of the federation? Division of powers, yes, there's division of powers between the center and the states. Written constitution, okay, we have a written constitution. Supremacy of the constitution, which means the constitution is the supreme, and be it the parliament or the state legislature or even a common person, he cannot go against the constitution. Okay, rigidity of the constitution, we talked about that earlier. Is the independent judiciary. What does independent judiciary mean? That as I've told you earlier, that the parliament, okay, the parliament, the legislature and the executives, they work together, they are interdependent on each other. Okay, and the legislature and the executive, they are interdependent on each other. But the judiciary is kept independent. Okay, why is that? Because if the parliament, okay, if the legislation and the executives, they make a mistake, okay, and they go against the constitution, okay, if they make a mistake and they go against the constitution, as the constitution is supreme and no one can go against it. But if the legislature goes against the constitution, at that time the judiciary can question the legislature, that on what basis have you made these decisions, these are against the constitution, and can consider those those provisions or those laws as unconstitutional, okay, and declare it void. That's why the judiciary is kept independent, because it is the guardian of our constitution, it guards our constitution, and no one can go against the constitution. Then bicameralism, that is the two chambers of the house, both for the center and the states. If we talk about the center, there's the Lok Sabha and the Rajya Sabha. When we talk about the states, it's the state legislative assembly and the state legislative council. Okay, now, however, the Indian constitution also contains a large number of unitary or non-federal features. So till now we were talking about the federalism. Okay, what does the federal system mean? Now what I'm talking about is what makes the constitution unitary. Okay, what makes the constitution unitary? A strong center. Okay, the center is strong. Second, single constitution both for the states and the center. Single citizenship. Okay, if you talk about the US, they follow a dual citizenship, which means that a person who's in US, he is not only a resident of that nation, but also he gets a citizenship of the particular state he belongs from. Okay, so he enjoys dual citizenship. However in india we follow a single citizenship, and that is the Indian citizenship. Okay, and we are not discriminated in terms of states, in terms of which state we belong from. Okay, so this maintains the unity of the nation. Flexibility of the constitution, as I've told you, that there are some provisions which can be amended in the constitution through simple majority. Integrated judiciary, okay, which means the highest one in the hierarchy, the highest one will be the Supreme Court, then below that will be the high courts, and below that will be the subordinate courts and the other courts. So there's an integrated judiciary. Appointment of the state governor by the center. Okay, so the governor, he is the head of the state. However, he is appointed by the center. Okay, and the state cannot appoint their own governor, but the center will appoint the governors. All India services, IPS, IAS, and all that. That talks about all India services. Then it's emergency provisions. For all India services, I'll explain this, that what happens is that however, there are state services also, right? There are state services and all. But when we talk about all India services, the center appoints the people who will be the head of the department. Okay, so there are various other departments where IAS, IPS officers are there, right? So in those departments, the center will appoint those people who will be the head. So the IAS officer is the head. Below that are the people who are appointed by the state, but the head is appointed by the center, right? So that's what this thing talks about, unitary features. So which talks about that center is more powerful than the states. Then comes the emergency provisions. Okay, as I've told you, that if an emergency proclaims in India, okay, is declared in India, at that time the powers which are being given to the state will be suspended for temporary period. Okay, so the powers which are given to the state will be suspended for a temporary period, and the center will take over the states, take over the whole nation basically. Okay, and all the decisions will be made by the center and not by the states. Remember, the term federation is has nowhere written in the constitution, has nowhere been used in the constitution, because we are not a true federation. Fifth one, parliamentary form of government. India adopted the British parliamentary system of government rather than the American presidential system of government. Okay, so we have a parliamentary system. The parliamentary system is based on the principle of cooperation and coordination between the legislative and executive organs, while the presidential system is based on the separation of powers between the two organs. Okay, so the parliamentary system, what does parliamentary system say? That there will be cooperation and coordination between the legislature and the executives. They will work together, they are interdependent on each other. While when we talk about the presidential system, in this what happens is that these two organs, which is the legislature and the executive, they are separated. Okay, they are totally separated. However, when we talk about the parliamentary system, the executive and the legislature, they work together, they cooperate together. Okay, so that is what is meant by the parliamentary system. The features of the parliamentary government in India are: presence of nominal and real executives. Okay, so the nominal executive is our president and the real executive is our prime minister. Okay, so there is presence of nominal and real executives. So the decisions will be taken by the prime minister with his council of ministers, and the president, who is the nominal executive, he needs to obey it, he needs to follow it. Second one, majority party rule. Okay, so what does this mean? So every year, every 5 years, Lok Sabha elections takes place, right? So what happens exactly? So in Lok Sabha, there are total 543 seats as of 2014. I'm talking about, there are total 543 seats of MPs to form and to form a government. It needs a majority votes of MPs that is more than 50%. Okay. So basically, what happens is that every 5 years, when the Lok Sabha election takes place, so there are total 543 seats, okay, which needs to be fulfilled, which needs to be taken in the Lok Sabha. Out of 543 seats, the political party, okay, out of 543 seats, the political party who manages to get more than 50% of the total, seats. Okay, so what is the 50% of 543? That is 273. So if a political party gets more than 273 seats in the Lok Sabha, then that political party is allowed to form the government. Okay, so that political party is allowed to form the government. Now there's one more clause, that is, if a party if no party, basically if no party manages to get majority, that is more than 50% of the total seats in the Lok Sabha, if they do not, if any party they do not get these if any party do not get a majority at that time, they can form coalition, which means two or more parties, they can come together and they can form a coalition to fulfill the requirement, which is more than 50% of the total house. Okay, so they can come together and they can form and to and they can form a government by getting more than 50% of the total seats in the Lok Sabha. So that is what happens. However, if we talk about 2014 elections, what had happened was BJP alone won 282 seats. Okay, so BJP alone, they won 282 seats without any kind of coalition. They alone won 282 seats, leading the NDA to a tally of 336 seats. So that is a huge milestone in the 2014 election which we have seen. So that is what is meant by majority party rule, which means the party which wins the elections of the Lok Sabha will be allowed to form the government, and the leader of that government will be the prime minister, will become the prime minister. The leader of that political party which has won the elections will become the prime minister. Collective responsibility of the executive to the legislature. Okay, so it is the collective responsibility of all the executives to the legislature. Membership of the ministers in the legislature, as I've told you that the executives and legislature, they work together, so the executives, they have a membership in the legislature. Leadership of the prime minister or the chief minister at the state level. Okay, so leadership of the prime minister at the center and the chief minister at the state level. Dissolution of the lower house. Okay, so the Lok Sabha can be dissolved. Okay, so the prime minister, he can advise the president to dissolve the Lok Sabha, or else after every 5 years automatically the Lok Sabha gets dissolved and fresh elections takes place. Okay, synthesis of parliamentary sovereignty and judicial supremacy. What does this mean? That sovereignty basically means that supreme power or authority. The parliament can amend the major portion of the constitution through its constituent power. Okay, the parliament has the power that they can amend, they can modify a major portion of the constitution. However, the parliament is independent, but the judiciary can question the parliament if it finds the parliamentary laws as unconstitutional and declare it against the constitution through its power of judicial review. However, the parliament is powerful, okay, and is the supreme power. Okay, however, the parliament is the supreme power, and they can amend the major portions of the constitution. Okay, they can modify major portions of the constitution. However, if the judiciary finds that the modifications which the parliament has made is against the constitution, or even if the parliament makes any kind of new laws or policies which are against the constitution, at that time the judiciary can declare that law to be unconstitutional, that is against the constitution, through its power of judicial review. So this is what it talks about: synthesis of parliamentary sovereignty and judicial supremacy. Okay, however, the parliament is supreme and supreme power authority. However, if they make any laws or if they modify any laws which are against the constitution, then the judiciary can question, and if they actually find it against the law, then they can void it also. Okay, through its power of judicial review. Seventh one, integrated and independent judiciary. Okay, so this is what it means: the higher portion is of the Supreme Court, then comes the High Court, then District Court, and and the other lower courts. So it is an integrated form of judiciary. Single system both for the center and the state. Okay, so this the court is for everyone. Okay, it's both for the center and the state. Okay, so that is what it is said: a single system both for the center and the state. However, the Supreme Court is a federal court, the highest court of appeal, and the guarantor of the fundamental rights of the citizens and the guardian of the Constitution. This is a very important point. The Supreme Court is a federal court, the highest court of appeal, which means above Supreme Court there is no other judiciary, and the Supreme Court is the highest court of appeal, the guarantor of the fundamental rights, which means that if my rights are being violated, at that time the Supreme Court will say that yes, I guarantee you that you will get justice. So that's what it means: the guarantor of the fundamental rights and of the citizens and the guardian of the Constitution, which means that the parliament, if they go against the Constitution or anyone goes against the Constitution, at that time the Supreme Court is a guardian for it. Okay, guards the Constitution all the time and says that if it's against the Constitution, it will declare it void. That's what this means. Hence, when there's so much power given to the Supreme Court, then some benefits should be given to ensure its independence, right? So that it will always remain independent and no parliament, no executive, they try to influence the judiciary. Right? So that's why security of tenure of the judges. Okay, the judges, they have a secure term in the court. Fixed service condition for the judges. Fixed service condition is there for the judges. All the expenses of the Supreme Court are charged on the Consolidated Fund of India. Okay. Prohibition on discussion on the conduct of judges in the legislature. So in the legislature, the executives, they cannot discuss on the judgments which are being given in the courts, in the Supreme Court, in the High Court, or any court. No executive is allowed to discuss about those things. Ban on practice after retirement. Okay, so once the judges, they are retired, they are banned on practice, they cannot practice anymore. Separation of the judiciary from the executive. So the judiciary is always kept independent. Eighth one, fundamental rights. Okay, right to equality, article 14 to 18, right to freedom, article 19 to 22. So these things I'll explain you in great detail in my further chapters. Right now I'm just explaining you in brief. Okay, so right against exploitation, article 23 24, right to freedom of religion. Okay, everyone has the right to follow his own religion and no one can be discriminated on that, article 25 to 28. Cultural and educational right to get education, so those things, article 29 to 30. Right to constitutional remedies, article 32. So these things I'll explain you in great detail when I'll take up the fundamental rights chapter. Okay, now ninth one, directive principles of state policy. What does this mean? The directive principles are meant for promoting the idea of social and economic democracy. They seek to establish a welfare state in India. These directives are non-justiciable in nature, that is, they are not enforceable by the courts for their violation. So directive principles are basically those provisions which are being given in the constitution, okay, are those provisions which are given in the constitution for the welfare of the people. Okay, those provisions which are mentioned in the constitution for the welfare of the people, basically for the welfare of the state. So indirectly it means for the welfare of the people. Now the first one says, so there are few points I have taken up. The minimize inequalities in income, status, facilities and opportunities, okay, which means that there shouldn't be discrimination on basis of income, status, facilities and opportunities, okay. Try to minimize inequalities in these things, okay. So that's what it said as a directive principle. The right to advocate means of livelihood for all citizens, okay. So everyone should have a decent lifestyle, decent standard of living. So if you know about the Pradhan Mantri Awas Yojana, housing for all by 2022, so these things, what I'm trying to say is that these things, okay, the directive principle of state policies, these are some provisions which are written in the constitution for the betterment of the people, okay. These are for the betterment of the people, however they are non-justiciable in nature, which means that if you don't get these things, you cannot go to the court, okay. So these are only those provisions for the betterment of the people where the government will try to do these things for its people. But if you don't get these things, it does not mean that you will go to the court for their violation, okay. So that is what the directive principles are. There are some provisions which are being given for a welfare state. Then equal pay for equal work for men and women, opportunities for healthy development of children, okay, or to build more hospitals, and all these things, they come under the directive principles, and they are non-justiciable in nature, which means the government will try to do these things for the people, but if they fail to do so, at that time you cannot approach the court for their violation, okay. So one more thing, why is these things non-justiciable in nature, okay. So what had happened was, when we got our independence, okay, that time the constitution was made, right. So at that time the British, they actually took away most of the money and we were left with almost nothing. We didn't had any infrastructure, any money and all that. So at that time, at that time, the founding fathers, they decided that the fundamental rights will be given to the people, okay. For their betterment, the fundamental rights will be given to the people. But as now we don't have any money left in the country, how can we give these things to our people? Like just the second example, which says that right to adequate means of livelihood for all the citizens, which means uh, giving houses, okay. At that time so much money will be required if they decide that everyone will get a house, okay. So at that time at that time the country was so poor and we didn't had any money. At that time, how can this be made as a fundamental right, okay. It was almost impossible for the government to do such a thing because no money was left, no infrastructure was like left. However, they said that the government should always try to implement these things, okay. The government should always try to implement these things. However, if they fail to do so, then you cannot approach the court. So that's what it means, okay. So this is what is about the directive principles. I will explain these things in great detail when we talk about the directive principles. So there's a complete chapter on this, so I'll explain all the things there. 10th one, fundamental duties. The original constitution did not provide for the fundamental duties of the citizens, okay. These were added by the 42nd Constitutional Amendment Act of 1976 on the recommendation of Swarna Singh Committee. Okay, so when our constitution was made, at that time fundamental rights were there, but fundamental duties was not added. Okay, fundamental duties basically mean that as a citizen of India, even you have some duties towards your nation. Okay, even you have some duties towards your nation. Okay, which means if you are given fundamental rights, that does not allow you to misuse your fundamental rights. Okay, which means that if you're given right to expression and speech, where you can talk about your grievances and all those things, at that time it does not allow you to go against the nation and talk against the nation. Okay, you cannot compromise on the unity of India. So these become your fundamental duties. You should always try to protect your country. You should always try to maintain unity in the country. So these are so here I have explained. I'll explain you some of the fundamental duties. However, I'll explain every every fundamental duty in detail in the further chapters. Okay, so one fundamental is duty is to respect the constitution. You should respect the constitution, you should respect the national flag, and you should respect the national anthem. This becomes your fundamental duty, to respect the constitution, national flag, and national anthem, to protect the sovereignty, unity, and integrity of the country, which means to protect the sovereignty, which is independent country. So our country is always independent, and you should always try to keep it independent. Okay, our country is independent, and you should always try to keep it independent, which means that if tomorrow a war is being declared and your nation wants you to help the nation, you help India, right? So a war is declared and the nation needs you, it needs your help, it needs your support, then at that time, to help your country, you should go. So that's what it says, to always try to keep your country independent, then keep it united always, and all these things become your fundamental duties, to promote the spirit of common brotherhood amongst all the people. Okay, so a common brotherhood should be there, a spirit of common brotherhood should be there amongst all the people. Then to preserve the rich heritage of a composite culture. Okay, so the monuments which are so old, you should always try to preserve them as much as possible, because those things are the pride of the nation, so you should always try to preserve it as it is. Now, 11th one, a secular state. The constitution does not uphold any particular religion as the official religion of the Indian state. Okay, so the constitution does not uphold any particular religion, and all religions in the country has equal status. Okay, they should be equally treated irregardless of the members of that religion. Okay, so every religion should be treated equally. 12th one is the universal adult franchise. What does this mean? The Indian constitution adopts universal adult franchise as a basis of elections to the Lok Sabha and the state legislative assembly. So this thing means that every citizen who is not less than 18 years of age has the right to vote without any discrimination of caste, race, religion, sex, literacy, wealth, and so on. Okay, so every citizen who is not less than 18 years of age, who is above 18 years of age, he has the right to vote, and he cannot be discriminated on his caste, race, religion, sex, literacy, wealth, and so on. Okay, so the voting age was reduced to 18 from 21 years in 1989 by the 61st Constitution Amendment Act of 1988. Okay, so before it was 21, then it was reduced to 18 years of age. So anyone who is above 18 years of age, he has the right to vote. 13th, single citizenship. Though the Indian constitution is federal and has a dual polity, practices of dual polity, that is the center and the state, it provides for only a single citizenship, that is the Indian citizenship. Okay, so even if there's division of powers between the center and the states, however, we have only a single citizenship, that is the Indian citizenship. In countries like USA, on the other hand, each person is not only a citizen of USA but also a citizen of a particular state to which he belongs. Thus, he enjoys dual set of rights. Okay, so this is what is practiced in USA, but however, in India, we only have one citizenship, no matter from whichever state you belong from. Okay, so this is what is single citizenship. Independent bodies. The Indian Constitution not only provides for a legislative, executive, and judicial organs of the government, which is both for the center and the state, but also establishes certain independent bodies. Okay, so not only there is legislative, executive, and judicial organs, but there are also some independent bodies. The first one is the Election Commission to ensure free and fair elections to the parliament, the state legislature, the office of the president of India, and the office of vice president of India. Okay, so the election commission should be kept independent so that there should be free and fair elections, right? There is no kind of corruption going on, or there's no kind of, like what usually is seen is that people get paid to vote and all these things which is happening. These are things which are illegal. Okay, these are the things which are illegal, and the election commission should always see that there is free and fair elections throughout the country. So that's why the election commission is kept independent, and no legislature or the executives or the judiciary can take part in this thing. They are independent. They are independent bodies. Second is Comptroller and Auditor General of India to audit the accounts of the central and the state governments. He acts as a guardian of the public purse and comments on the legality and propriety of government expenditure. So every year we pay our taxes, right? We pay our taxes. Now the Comptroller and Auditor General, he ensures that the money which that's the public money which is being spent by the government is spent effectively, and there is no kind of corruption going on. So the Comptroller and Auditor General, it checks on these things. He's the guardian of the public purse. So this is so the Comptroller and Auditor General is kept independent, so that no executive, no minister tries to influence him, right? So these things. Third, Union Public Service Commission to conduct examination for recruitment to all India services and higher central services, and to advise the president on disciplinary matters. So this is also kept independent. Okay, so Union Public Service Commission to conduct examination all India services, or no, for all India services. Okay, D, State Public Service Commission, the same thing but for the state, in every state, to conduct examination for recruitment to state services and to advise the governor on disciplinary matters. Okay, then the Constitution ensures the independence of these bodies through various provisions like security of tenure, fixed service condition, expenses being charged on the Consolidated Fund of India, and so on. So they try to keep this thing always independent by giving various provisions, various benefits. Okay. So this is the 14th point. Emergency provisions. The Indian Constitution contains emergency provisions to enable the president to meet any extraordinary situations effectively. Okay, so the Indian Constitution, there are some provisions which are there in the Indian Constitution which enable the president to meet any extraordinary situations effectively, like war. Okay, so these are extraordinary situations, so there are provisions which enable the president to meet these situations effectively. The reason is to safeguard the sovereignty, unity, integrity, and security of the country, the democratic political system, and the constitution. Okay, so why are these provisions given? So that to safeguard the sovereignty, the independence of the country, to maintain unity, integrity in the country, and security in the country. Okay, for these things the constitution has provided some provision to enable the president to meet any situation like this. Okay, there are three types of emergencies. The first one is the national emergency on the grounds of war or external aggression or armed rebellion. Okay, so this thing talks about the national emergency, like war is being declared, tomorrow we go on a war with Pakistan. So those things, that is a emergency which has been declared in the country, right? Or external aggression or armed rebellion. So this means that a particular group of community, they have come together and they formed a riot is going on with arms, with swords, guns, and all these things. So these are all emergencies. Okay, so that is what is the national emergency. The second one is the state emergency, which is also called as the president rule. So this thing says on the ground of failure of constitutional machinery in the state. Okay, or failure to comply with the directions of the center. This thing talks about that if a state refuses to obey the center. Okay, if a state refuses to obey a center, or a state government has failed. Okay, if a state government has failed or it refuses to obey the center, at that time state emergency can be declared in that particular state, which is also called as president's rule. Okay, so what all happens in these things I'll explain you in the further chapters. Financial emergency on the ground of threat to the financial stability or credit of India, Article 360. Okay, till now fortunately India never experienced such an emergency, the financial emergency India has never experienced. So what does this mean? That financial emergency is basically if India goes into recession, to depression and everything. Okay, there's no money left in the country, so at that time financial emergency can be declared. During an emergency, the central government becomes all powerful and the state go into the total control of the center. So when we talk about the emergency, at that time the central government becomes all powerful. Okay, the central government will now take all the decisions and the states will go into total control of the center. It converts the federal structure into a unitary one without a formal amendment of the constitution. So without an amendment in the constitution, it converts the federal structure into a unitary one. Three-tier government. Originally, the Indian Constitution, like any other federal constitution, provided for a dual polity and content provisions with regard to the organization and powers of the center. Okay, so first, like a dual polity, there were two, that is the center and the states. Okay, later the 73rd and 74th Constitutional Amendment Acts of 1992 added a three-tier government. Okay, so what does three-tier government mean? The the 73rd Amendment Act of 1992 gave constitutional recognition to the panchayats, rural local governments. Before this, it was just the center and the state, but in 73rd Amendment of 1992 gave constitutional recognition to the panchayats, okay, by adding a new part 9 and a new schedule 11 to the constitution. Okay, now 74th Amendment Act of 1992 gave constitutional recognition to the municipalities, that is the urban local government, okay, by adding a new part 9A and a new schedule 12 to the constitution. Okay, so before this there was only the center and the states, but in 1992 panchayats, that is the rural local government, and municipalities, urban local governments, were given constitutional recognition. 17th, cooperative societies. Okay, what does this mean? What does cooperative society mean? Okay, so let's talk about what does cooperative society mean. A cooperative society is an autonomous, having the freedom to govern itself or control its own affairs, is an autonomous association of persons united voluntarily to meet their common economic, social, and cultural needs. What does this mean? A basic example is of a housing cooperative societies. You might have seen these in these societies almost everywhere, so it's there in every area and all that in the country, right? So what is a cooperative society? Now when we talk about an housing cooperative society, what is their main motto? What is their main cause? Okay, they have voluntarily come together for a common cause. What is that cause? That cause is to build house. Everyone wants a house. Okay, so what they do is that they form a cooperative society. Okay, they form a cooperative society in which they have their own rules and regulations. Okay, and the government cannot interfere in that, so they have their own rules and regulations, and they govern themselves. Okay, and they manage their own affairs. Okay, now when we talk about housing society, so what they do is that they have their own rules and regulations. So they will buy a huge chunk of land, like acres of land, and after that they'll divide amongst themselves and they will distribute it and all those things. So they have their own rules and regulations. They can add members however they want and all these things. So that is what a cooperative society is. A cooperative society is a group of people who are coming together, a group of people who are coming together and for a common cause. A group of people are coming together for a common economic, social, and cultural needs. Okay, one more very common cooperative society is of the consumers cooperative society, the shopkeepers society basically. Okay, so these people, they have their own cooperative society in every city and all. They have their own society. Okay, they have their own cooperative society where their basic motto, their basic function is to distribute, is to do business. Okay, so when we talk about the consumers cooperative society, they usually buy household items in a wholesale rate, and after that they distribute it in wherever their shops and all these things. So they have their own cooperative society. So when a group of people, they come together for a common cause, okay, for a common need, if they are coming together, they form a cooperative society. Okay, so this is what it means. Okay, so there are various others, I'll explain you some more. So when we talk about the consumers cooperative society, they are the oldest form of cooperatives. They are formed for the benefit of consumers who wish to get household goods at reasonable prices. Okay, these society make bulk purchases of goods from producers directly or from wholesalers at wholesale rates, and sell the goods to the members, basically to the citizens. Okay, so what they do is that they purchase these items, these household goods, from the producers themselves. Okay, from the producers themselves or from wholesalers. They'll buy it, and after that they will distribute it to the citizens. Then there's the producers cooperatives, that and they are formed by small producers who plan to obtain inputs, raw materials, components, and to sell their output, that is their finished goods, by direct distribution and without any involvement of middlemen. Okay, they are called as industrial cooperative society cooperatives. So basically, the manufacturing industries and all those things, they have their own association. Okay, they have their own association where they will buy the raw materials, the tools and equipments and all, and after that they'll produce the finished goods and then they'll sell it directly. So these are the people. So it's like the people who have a common need. Okay, who have a common need, they come together and they form an autonomous body. Okay, which means they are free to govern themselves, they are free to make their own rules and regulations and all these things. Then there's the cooperative credit society. The objectives of forming cooperative credit society is to provide loans to the members at reasonable rates. So instead of going to the banks, you can go to these cooperative societies and they will provide you loan at reasonable rates, rate of interest and all. So basically this is what is cooperative society. You can go ahead and you can read the other cooperative societies also. Okay, now what India is doing, what our nation is doing for these cooperative society. Right to form cooperative society is a fundamental right. So what is our constitution doing for these cooperative societies? So the first one says that right to form cooperative society is a fundamental right. You have the right to form a cooperative society. The second one is new directive principle of state policy on promotion of cooperative societies. So a new directive principle of state policy on promotion. The state policy can the directive principle of state policy says that you should the government the state should try to promote these cooperative societies. Okay, then it was added as a new part 9b entitled as the cooperative society from articles 243zh to 243zt. Okay, so guys, this is the end of the third chapter on the salient features of the constitution. I hope you liked the lecture. Okay, so thank you, bye bye.